In Season 2, Episode 4 of Youth Empowerment Radio, Carlton Mason, CEO of the 7th Judicial District, CASA, shares his inspiring journey and CASA's mission to empower youth through unconditional love, advocacy, and trust. Carlton highlights the impact of breaking cycles of abuse with compassionate support and meaningful connections, offering hope and empowerment to youth in crisis.
The material and information presented here is provided by lived experience youth and is for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of those of the guest only and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got into your role.
My name is Carlton Mason. I'm currently the CEO for CASA of the 7th Judicial District. I've been in that role for just over 10 years and ended up here kind of out of a fluke. Someone had told my wife that CASA had an opening, and my wife responded she didn't need a job, that her husband needed to go find a job. So I went down and spent a couple hours learning about what the organization does, and it just kind of blew my mind. I had no idea that our young people that some of them were struggling like they are, and the conditions that created that, which are often no fault of their own, just things that are occurring within the families.
What shocked you the most when you were learning about CASA?
You know, Jared, I grew up in a home where I was pretty sheltered from the things that went on around us in society. I grew up in an incredibly loving parent, but they put me in a private Christian school from kindergarten on up, all the way through high school, even into college. And so I really never had the opportunity to be aware of what was going on in society around me. I was living a very comfortable, not affluent, but very comfortable, well-loved, secure, safe life, and moved into adulthood, found, business and career. And when I became aware, I knew it was time to make some changes in my life and answer, to engage in that need that was out there for our young people.
Yeah. So that kind of moves me into the next question. What is our purpose and mission here at CASA?
Obviously, our mission is to help break the cycle of abuse and neglect through engagement, advocacy, and interaction. But I think even beyond that, it goes a little bit deeper. The organization has a mission statement. We have a vision statement, and they really align well with what we try to do big picture. But I think there's a way to phrase that is maybe even a little more understandable and a little less institutional. What do we want to do? I want to see young people. I want to see what happens when a young person feels the sense of value, when they know that the people around them actually care about them, are invested in them, and that the relationships that occur between them are not about a transaction. They're not about, well, if you do what I say, then I will in return do X, Y, or Z. I always avoided those kind of scenarios. Even growing up in the home that I did, we never had that kind of a transactional situation. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't have to be a good boy in order to get supper or to feel loved or to feel safe. Like, I could do all kinds of stupid things, and the people around me stayed the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I completely get that, because it's like there should be no rhyme or reason to justify whether or not someone deserves love or attention, because they deserve it regardless what they do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I wanted to get into this work. That's my mission, is to see if I can bring to a young person's life something maybe they didn't experience, that a healthy adult can bring, that just simply says, you know what, our relationship, my commitment to you is going to stay the same regardless of, your life choices, because you're a valuable human being.
Yeah. Wow.
And you're worthy of my time. and, our investment.
That means so much to so many people. Like, I know for me personally, like hearing that and being like a witness to that and feeling that myself, it has done wonders for my life and for me. So, like, I don't know, just hearing that reiterated of like, there's no amount of things that you can do or accomplish that's going to change the fact that you deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. Like, oh, that's profound. Like, so question, in what ways do you get to witness that? Or how have you seen that play out?
It's really interesting because my role as the director or the CEO doesn't really put me on the front lines. Now, over the years, including you and a slew of young people, as I get to know them and as those opportunities occur, we do create these really warm, friendly relationships. And I value that I have with them individually, but even more so to be able to watch you and Kylie, our other peer support specialist, Christy, to be able to watch Justin and Stacia and Mercedes, the team, be able to go out there and provide this type of engagement that is not transactional, that is just simply like, I'm here for you regardless. To be able to watch you all have the opportunity to experience that, I think that's as life-changing or as inspiring for me as it is to be able to do that myself. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. What do you think are some barriers that youth face when trying to come to terms with being able to have that type of engagement?
Jared, I think I kind of have to look at my own life and then I have to look at what I think might be missing. And I want to be really respectful of all the young people we engage or in some way serve, because I think each young person might identify that differently, like what they see their barrier as.
Yeah.
But if I would back up and say, what really took away those barriers for me? In other words, what made sure that I had no barrier? And it was a trust, the ability to trust. That ability to trust the people around me, even sometimes when maybe they weren't trustworthy, like it impacts the way we live our life.
Yeah.
If to live with fear and the lack of trust definitely aligns with an increase in fear. The less you can trust, probably the more anxiety or fear you're going to experience. To be able to get past that anxiety or fear, just as individuals, allows you to dream and aspire and hope and fail and try again. But you have to feel like the environment around you is safe and the people around you are safe and that they can be trusted. So I think that's one of the biggest things I hope to address, in just being consistent and being present.
So what I'm hear you saying is it really matters how we show up for the youth and whether or not we're creating that safe environment, that safe space, and energetically that we're sharing the space with them and showing, not just telling or saying, but showing that they're the ones that are kind of the ones in control of the space and where it's going to lead them and like giving trust so they can also give trust.
Yeah, it'll only be reciprocated once it's been received. A lot of things are that way, but I want to come back to something you just said, something about how we show up. I think that is so important, and I think you're onto something there because when we consider, for instance, the situations or the scenarios or the challenges that are going to be brought to us by your peers or the young people we engage with or serve, there's just no way we're going to know the answer for all these situations.
Yeah.
To have a young person walk into my space and tell me that, they're facing charges and it is for something that is deplorable, I can't look at them and say, well, here's how we'll fix this. There is no fix. Or, a young couple to be like, I'm not sure we actually love each other and we think we should just quit. And there are small children involved. I can't tell them what to do. So the question comes back to then what do I control in all of these situations? And the only thing we control, that's right, is something you and I have talked about before, that we've talked about as a team. The only thing you control is who you want to be in that moment. So when these really troubling situations come, it's okay to step back and say, you know what? I don't have the answer. I probably can't fix this, but I know that the person I want to be is one that stays present, that stays engaged, that exhibits compassion, that actually has compassion. So those are the kind of things we have to pay attention to.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like moreover too, it's like we have to be transparent with what we know, like what kind of what's in our wheelhouse too. Like you were saying, like we don't always have the answers and we're not always going to be able to help, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So being honest and upfront, like honestly, that's not really something that I'm comfortable like helping you figure out right now, or I'm honestly not sure where we could go with that. Like, how would you like me to help you with that? Or, I hear you and that's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what to do with that.
Sometimes it's okay to just even sit quietly
Yeah.
and actually feel
Yeah.
that intensity that they feel. And
Just acknowledge it.
yeah, to just stay in that space, even though it is painful and uncomfortable and just exist there to know that they're not alone.
Yeah. Would you be willing to share a moment or a story that made an impact on you?
Oh, Jared, there's been so many. Um, I'm going to share this one, and it involves you. And early on, when we got in this work, we had moved into our building, and you had come in and shared with me that your roommate didn't feel comfortable coming in. It was a young lady, and I was like, we talked about it a little bit, and tried to figure out, how we could address that. And I remember asking you to just have her come in and sit down and talk to me because I'd love to meet her. And she came in, and her uh, her clothes were cut, her arms had fresh cuts on them, and I really didn't understand like why. They knew it was, a way to deal with pain, but she sat down with me and we just began to talk, and I had to ask her. I said, so the cutting, what occurs that makes you feel like that's something you need to do? And how can I make sure that I don't contribute to that? And we just really had a nice conversation around that. But it was because it was an issue that we needed to figure out how to respectfully talk about and not just ignore. If you'll recall, before she left that day, I thanked her for coming in, told her, I said, you have a wonderful smile. And I said, if you would, I'd love to hire you to sit at our front desk. And she went on to sit at our front desk and helped answer the door and answer the phone for a number of months after that. So, I mean, it was, those are the kind of memorable moments. Not that anything great or groundbreaking occurred, but that we were just able to figure out two generations, two different genders, two different backgrounds. We were able to sit in the room, share a space, and figure out how to connect. And I think when I go back, any story I could tell you has those elements in common.
I really appreciate that story. Sometimes as we move forward through programs or jobs or just life happenings, we forget to kind of take a second and look back at the big and small impacts. And I like the way that you took that, because when we hear impact, we think of like a huge moment or a big change or something that like has gradually taken effect or like an immediate like shift. But like you said, sometimes it's It's those small moments that mean so much, and they last a long time. And like, I love that you responded that way.
It's, we were over in Colorado Springs. You were with us. And I remember thinking then, because I was, we were there at the Broadmoor, and I remember thinking then, and I think some of my comments alluded to this, what we do is incredibly ordinary. It's listening, it's caring, it's empathy, it's holding a safe space. These are all such ordinary moments and ordinary things to do. They are things that most of us at some point have figured out how to extend or share and how to receive or benefit from. And so it's these ordinary moments that create extraordinary individuals. And I think the objective or the goal that we need to have is to figure out how to do more of the ordinary and to make sure we're doing it with young people who have not had the opportunity to receive it or experience it like they should.
So you're onto something. Speaking of which, so what about our services and programs relates to helping end homelessness for youth in our community?
Well, when you look at our programs, we work with runaway and homeless youth. We work with kids that are coming out of foster care. Maybe they came out years ago. Maybe they were returned home, at 14 or 15 or 12 or 13. But then there are still consequences to that exhibit themselves at 18, 19, and 20. And I think those services, so there are those services for the foster care kids, for the youth that are runaway and homeless. And how do we really fight against this issue of homelessness? I think at the end of the day, there is really only one thing that creates change, and that is the power of a positive, healthy relationship. So while we provide housing, while we provide access to resources, while we can alleviate some of the hurdles, or resolve, maybe it's needing car insurance or, a driver's license or a birth certificate, we can do a lot of those things. But all those things, even the housing, are simply opportunities for us to create that healthy connection. So if we really want to change the outcome or change, contribute to the change in direction, then it is still that healthy relational support that achieves that change. They do need the housing.
Yeah.
But we learned early on that housing is simply a place to find them. It's not, it doesn't change their lives. It doesn't impact their lives like a caring person can change their lives.
Yeah. This analogy popped into my head. It's like repotting a plant, right? But if you don't repot the plant in the type of soil it needs, and you don't water it, you don't put it in front of a window with sunlight, it's not going to grow. So those healthy connections, that support system, those access to all the services and creating that positive connection is what's watering them, helping them to grow in ways that we didn't think possible. Well, we think possible, but what if they didn't think that was possible for themselves?
Right. Good analogy.
Thanks. Yeah. So what would you consider success to look like for the youth that we serve?
That's interesting. I've actually been asked that question quite a few times, especially as we've gotten into housing. And I think that's a really great question because I think there's a lot of preconceived ideas around what success is. I think as a society, we have told our young people that for generations, we told them if you get a college education, that's successful. We've told them if you make lots of money, that's success. If you, have a nice car, if you have these things, this is success. And is it possible that maybe all that has contributed to some of the chaos we have right now, some of the confusion we have right now, where we can see highly successful individuals who still struggle to have a caring adult relationship with anyone around them. If success is simply defined as those things that we see as a Western society are valuable and important and indicators of power, you might say.
Mhm.
How would I define success? Let's take you, for example, and kind of work our way through that from my perspective, okay? If it's a good day, Jared, then we've got elements of success. If you feel like you have contributed to the improvement of someone's life around you, that's a success. If you feel at the end of the day you have created or generated a step in your life that brings you closer to something you aspire to be or something you dream to have or to occur, that's success. I don't think we need to define it as a goal as much as a beautiful journey.
Wow. I'm speechless. That is so true. Wow. Yeah. There's something about kind of breaking away from traditional beliefs and societal norms that just feels so comforting to me when you break things down to like things kind of align with like values and morals and just like overall like kind of talents, if that makes sense. So like you were saying, if at the end of the day you feel like you contributed to someone else's success or someone else's well-being and you help them, or if you lended a helping hand, or if you just wake up in a good mood, if you're happy that day, if you make someone smile, like, and it's also like very individualized, for what I think is really a great day for me could just be like an okay day for you, you know? So I think you kind of explaining it that way really individualizes it for everyone because, like, in a sense, like we're all like on the spectrum of what success is for each of us because there's no cookie cutter way of, I don't know, shaping that for someone, because it's very individual and personal, you know?
Yeah, I think if we always define success as the achievement of some, destination or some goal, then we're we're really we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to close the door to the opportunities that are right there in our face because we're too busy looking past them at this other goal or this other objective that we think will define us and make us whole and make us complete. And in reality, let's celebrate the journey. Like, let's really figure out how to be comfortable with the fact that I am here, I exist, I have today. I know, and I think you're aware for me, there is a strong spiritual element. I believe that that is a part of everyone's life. And that doesn't mean, we all go to church or we all pray every morning. I just mean to simply say there is a component of our life that can be fed by nurturing the idea that there is something bigger than us, that there is something outside of us that also sees us as valuable and creative and worthy.
What I hear you saying is having hope.
Exactly. That's a good way to sum it up. Like, that's to expand. That's a great way to bring this full circle. Success. To see a kid, to see any of us with hope and a purpose.
Wow. I need a second to kind of absorb all that and just feel it for a second, Just feel what was just talked about. Because this is real, this isn't some made up, scripted conversation that we're having. This is from the heart. This is something real that we believe in, like where morally and spiritually and mentally we kind of like pour ourselves, And I think
You know,
it's so important to speak from that space.
I think, Jared, and here's what I really appreciate about this interview and about the questions you've asked. I think we could have sat here for 30 minutes and discussed the problems. But you've really led us down a conversation that is more about who can we be? What do we value? How do we make sure this journey is significant and purposeful for not only ourselves, but for those around us?
Yeah.
And, we've often said hope, purpose, and a plan. You can get those three together, you're on the road.
Yeah. You're singing. You got the torch burning.
Yep.
All right. Next question. So what's something that you would like to tell someone who's going to potentially listen to this podcast? What's some insight you'd like to leave with them?
So I don't know who all listens to this podcast. Okay. So I don't know if it's individuals like myself or if it's young people, but I think this message will be good for anyone, because maybe it's language that needs to be used more often, or that we could use as we engage, whether it's with directors of organizations or entities that perhaps feel like they have a little more power than we do sometimes. Comes back to, I think about it in terms of a conversation I had with some folks here locally regarding homelessness, the unhoused, the challenges that face our society. And they had asked the question, what do you think the biggest challenge or the biggest hurdle we're going to face? Of course, things came up like, well, we need accessible bathrooms. We need to make sure they're warm at night. We need to make sure that they can access food. And I thought, I bet you, here's what I think the biggest challenge we face when we deal with these issues of homelessness or, youth in crisis or young people in trauma. How are you going to respond when you don't get the response you want? And I think that is a personal challenge to each of us, especially those of us who may be in positions where our hand is on resources or our hand has access to things that others may not have access to. Resources that it's our responsibility to share and to reflect. But how are you going to respond? And I think that's really the challenge I would leave with all of us, whether it's a young person struggling, right now to find their place, or whether it's a director or CEO of an organization thinking about this work and how should they get involved. What's going to be your response when you don't get the action you want? How are you going to handle that? And let's make it personal for us, because we deal with a lot of housing.
Yeah.
How are you going to respond when the young person actually breaks the rules?
Yes.
What's your response going to be then? If our effort is simply going to be to see if we can get them out of the unit, then our impact on their life is simply to affirm what they have already been told, and that is they are not valued. They are trouble. They are more trouble actually than they're worth. And those are messages we never want to send. So when we don't get that response, whether it's, from my perspective, as I move someone into a home and the home is destroyed or the home is allowed to be filthy, can I step back and still value that young person in the face of that expense or that challenge and say, you know what? Let's see if we can figure out a way to navigate this together and come out the other side where we're even better friends. How often we've been in situations where, and I know this occurs here and even in our own office, where I'll be approached that a tenant needs a violation. And one of the first questions out of my mouth is always, so is this just punitive or is there some restorative action linked to this so that we can achieve the goal we want to achieve?
Yes.
My goal is not to punish. The young people have already experienced enough condemnation, enough punishment, enough vitriol at a very early age.
Yeah.
How do we turn that around and say, okay, how can this moment be restorative, be rejuvenating? And I think that's probably the thing I would say that people really need to think about. It's easy when everything is transactional and we know that if you do X, I will do Y. And that's beautiful. And a lot of times things occur that way. But there are also those moments where it's not. Like we have to think outside the box and say, you know what?
It's it.
Yeah, pivot. It's a great way to say it. We need to look at it again from a different perspective and say, okay, so I didn't get the result I wanted this time. How could I change my inputs, positive inputs, you know, to see if I could try this again and achieve what I want to achieve and still be the person that I want to be? Because I still believe that most of us don't want to go home at night and go to bed angry. Like that very simple thought, like most of us don't want to do that.
Yeah. No, thank you.
So how do we respect those values that get us up every morning, put us in the workplace and help us do this work? And I think that's something we need to consider.
Wow. Absolutely. 100%. I think that is so important for anyone at any age to just try to listen to, try to respond, like respond in a different way. Like my takeaways from what you just said is learn a better way to respond. You know,
Yeah.
try to look at it from another angle so we can still be respectful of their values and ours and our own. And also, it's not always about us.
Yep. Very seldom.
So imagine there's a youth out there in our community right now who is in need of resources and some help. What would you say to them right now to help?
I would say they need to come on in. And the scope of services we provide is really broad, Jared. We can help that young person with anything from stabilization, maybe even in the home they're already in, to housing. We can also look at issues related to documentation, education, life goals. As you're well aware, when young people come into our building, we don't set the agenda. We sit down with them, we use coach-like engagement, and we give them the safety and the space to spell out for us what it is they would like to work on. And then we bring those resources to the table that we have, which can be, access to food, shelter, housing, educational goals, stabilization, socialization, any of the life skills that they may be struggling with. We have spent a lot of time putting together a spread of resources for our young people to minimize the need to say, we can't help you. The point is, for a lot of our young people out there, I still believe that they know where they want to go and they know how they need to get there. They just need to know if it's safe to try. And so I would say to that young person, come on in, sit down with you or Justin or Mercedes, have those conversations about what they want to work on. And then let us see what we can bring to the table to help them achieve their goals. Not ours, but theirs.
Well, Carlton, I think we're nearing the end of our interview. I just have to say thank you for being willing to do this, being so present and in the moment and insightful and raw and real. Like, I think this is great. And I think you're great. And
Jared, I enjoy doing this with you. Can't imagine anybody I've enjoyed it more with. We have a long history and just a great friendship. And you're an incredible young person that I value. You matter.
thank you, Carlton. You're amazing.